Today, we're with Lucas Lensch, CEO of Midwest Dairy, the checkoff promotion organization for 10 states from Minnesota to Arkansas, representing 7,000 dairy families to 79 million consumers. Lucas recently completed the Dairy Experience Forum, July 16 through 18, held in St. Paul. Midwest Dairy partnered with Dairy Farmers of Wisconsin and put on this really dynamic event. Lucas, welcome to Dairy Business, and tell us a little bit about some of your impressions from the Dairy Experience Forum.
Well, Joel, first off, thank you for the opportunity to be with you and your listeners today. This was a forum about convening the supply chain. And from the very onset, our dairy farmer board members, our leaders, really challenged us, if we're going to be talking about giving consumers an excellent dairy experience and really bringing dairy to life from the farm to the fridge, how does that really play out in front of today's consumers? And what we found is with this disruptive forum, and it's really an intentional disruption where we are being aspirational in our attempt to convene the supply chain. We do that by way of, first off, listening to what consumers are thinking. And at this Dairy Experience Forum this year, we started with a Generation Z panel. So that's basically anybody born between 1996 and 2010. And it was a great example for us to hear what they're thinking and why it's so important to be listening to this generation in particular. People might be thinking, well, maybe they don't have the money to be influential. The reality is they vote not only with their own resources, but moms and dads, grandmas and grandpas, they have more influence on purchasing decisions than any other generation. And what's interesting, just think about it. If you're out with your grandkids or your children who might be in this generation, you ask them, where do you want to eat? What do you want in the shopping cart? They have so much influence, and that was very evident in the conversation. What was stuck out with me is the fact that they are really about transparency and that trust handshake between a consumer, the processor, and the farm. They want to believe in what they're buying. They vote with their checkbook, and they know that they're after corporate and social responsibility. And I think that trust handshake that they're looking for is evident from that consumer panel, and the audience really enjoyed the conversation.
That sounds exciting. And speaking of change, you also had a segment with online food buying and home delivery. How is that going to impact our dairy products?
Well, I think there's no question that as a consuming public spends well over half of its money today eating out, what does that mean from a retail standpoint and how I receive my groceries? The e-commerce component was just another fantastic dialogue around expect the unexpected. How are people getting their groceries today? Even the design of apartments, even how we are receiving our food at the home gate. Having access to external doors to your home where the store delivery can put refrigerated foods and have a key code, and you then have a refrigerator that you can access on the other side of that wall when you're back home. And so it's cold chain, but it's also being mindful of where people are getting marketed to. And if you're a retailer and you're in this conversation, you got to be listening to where the consumers are at. And so when we talk about convening supply chain, Joel, it's so important to be thinking about it, not just from the farm gate, not just at the processor, but it's all the way through retailer and food service. And how are all of these points of intersection playing out for today's consumer?
Well, with changing consumers and changing marketing, innovation of products is something too that's critical. You had folks from General Mills and Sartori Cheese and AMPI, the co-op. What did you hear from those folks about new products that are coming into the market?
Well, the fact is that today's consumers are looking for an opportunity to engage and get what they're looking for, I guess, if you will. What we heard from each of them is trying to be out in front of innovation, to help lead it, to help create it is a challenge, but one that they're all up to. And it's a challenge worth being part of, because if you're not leading innovation as a category, somebody else is coming in, whether they're talking about the yogurt marketplace, whether we're talking about being the brand behind the brands like an AMPI, or if you're a Sartori, that specialty cheese marketplace. It's constant innovation. And that innovation sandbox that we heard about last year, you could really see playing out with these companies this year. It's making sure that the innovations are well placed, but also the ability to fail quickly. If something's not quite working, or we got to go back to the innovation sandbox, if you will, it's okay, because today's consumers are looking for a responsive brand. And that flavor profile, you don't have to look any further than even the menu board at some of these food service restaurants, for example, that are appealing to a Generation Z that we focused in on. They want flavor, they want change. And that's pretty hard if you're a major brand to react to major changes and fluxes with consumers. And so I think that was a real spirit that I heard from the panel was they want to be where the consumers are. They want to be innovating, but they also want that innovation to create value for the whole supply chain.
One of your important featured speaker was former Ag Secretary Tom Vilsack, who's, of course, CEO, president of U.S. Dairy Export Council. What was his message to the group?
Well, Secretary Vilsack just consistently brings home the tremendous perspective, not only from the post that he previously held with the President Obama administration, but as former Secretary of USDA, the scope of today's consumers globally is only growing. And that fact that 95% of all consumers live outside of our country, and the idea that what we produce as a country can really react and provide to that growing global population. I think the spirit of innovation is alive and well on the international landscape, but it's growing beyond a commodity mindset. It's looking at how we bring value home to our producers here in the country and for our processors. So the export of value-added products is top of mind as you think about where this growing global population and trends are taking us. And Secretary just, again, delivered that message home. And whether you're a processor, co-op, if you're a retailer, you're food service, the global food service partnerships that we enjoy through Dairy Management Incorporated and the rest of the checkoff, you can see those relationships playing out for global market access through the lens that Secretary Vilsack also provided.
Sure. An inspirational speaker, I'm told, was the musician Billie McLaughlin, who had a message from his personal experience about change and a changing industry and relating to a changing industry and changing life. Maybe as a wrap up here, you could just tell us a bit about what he shared.
Well, one of the things that Billie McLaughlin shared is the fact that he's a guitarist, he's a musician that's well known, but had to go through a complete change in the sense that he learned his instrument right-handed and he had to switch to a left-handed play. And the reason is that he had a disability, and not until he owned it and admitted what he was dealing with in his mind with a medical condition, only then could he make a change. And he had to relearn an instrument. And if you can only imagine, if you're living in a right-hand world and you have to do everything left-handed, how much of a challenge that could be. And for him, he just helped the audience understand that you can translate through work and perseverance. You can relearn something. And if you don't have to look any further, Joel, than our own dairy industry, what has traditionally been good enough and been a solid part of how we conduct business has only been disrupted in recent years. And so we have to be willing to maybe revisit our position if something's changed and really be willing to put the work in to survive in that changing world. So great conversation for sure. And I think the audience left inspired and willing to be challenged, because for him it was 18 months and then it was another 18 months of training himself so that he could relearn his gift of music.
Well, it sounds like it was a great experience at your Experience Forum, and we appreciate you sharing it with us. We've been talking today with Lucas Lensch, CEO of Midwest Dairy. I'm Joel Hastings for DairyBusiness.com.